Hello and welcome to the ADHD Artist Podcast, where we explore and celebrate the lives of artists with ADHD. Listen to interviews with all different types of artists with ADHD, where we talk about life, art, superpowers, and... Wait, what was I saying? Hosted by Sarah Guys, your fellow ADHD artist. Thanks for joining. Hey everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 14, and we've made it a year. I cannot believe how much the podcast has grown since it started a year ago. But really, I just pinch myself all the time that I have this platform where I get to interview really cool people, which means I get to hang out with really cool people and then share that with you all. So I just wanted to thank you all again for all your support and your emails and DMs and everything. It really means a lot. So don't ever feel like you're bothering me by sending those and telling me moments in the interviews that have stuck out to you or made you feel less alone. It really makes me happy, and I hope you'll share it with people you know that might be interested. Before I start talking about our guest for the episode today, here is a quick word about one of our sponsors. So if you are a visual artist looking for inspiration, Paper Demon is a free online role-playing game designed to help artists get motivated to create. Draw your original character visiting their fantastical worlds and be rewarded with ability points, XP, and loot. Learn more at www.paperdemon.com/ADHDartistpod. Again, that's www.paperdemon.com/ADHDartistpod. Okay, so Jamie McKelvey is my guest today. I have a fun little story about Jamie that I want to share now, but I will save it for the beginning of the interview for you. So, here's a little bit about Jamie. Jamie McKelvey is a writer, artist, designer, and director, best known for his frequent collaborations with Kieran Gillen on projects such as Young Avengers and the critically acclaimed 9-volume epic, The Wicked and the Divine. He has designed several characters for Marvel Comics that have since been translated to screen, including Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Loki, and America Chavez. Outside of comics, Jamie has worked with several bands including Tegan and Sara and Art Brut, and regularly collaborates with churches, including directing the video for their song, Bury It. He lives in Scotland with his girlfriend and their cat. And just a heads up, towards the end of meeting, we recorded a little bonus episode which has some fan questions. Questions like, what is your favorite character to draw? And what kind of music do you listen to when you draw? That may be fun for you to listen to. So we'll release that as a bonus episode. So look out for that later this week. I can't wait for you to get to know Jamie. And so without further ado, here's my interview with Jamie McKelvey. I'm here with Jamie McKelvey. Jamie, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. No problem.
So I had reached out to you and said I would love to interview you and all this stuff. And I didn't know much about your stuff, but I really liked your artwork. And then long story short, after you had agreed, I told my boyfriend, like, hey, I'm going to interview this person. Have you heard of this comic book? And he was like, have I heard of it? And was so upset with me that I didn't know that I was interviewing one of his heroes. And it was just very exciting this week. So that just adds to my excitement of being here.
Yeah, thank you. And thank him for saying that as well. That's really nice.
I will. Yeah. But so I like to start and just ask, like, have you had any ADHD moments that have stuck out in the past couple days, this morning even?
Yeah. So the temperature dropped quite a lot, sort of the last few hours. It's never that warm in Scotland anyway, but like it got really cold. And I was just sat here for probably about an hour being really cold until I got to the point where I turned the heating on.
Okay.
Like I was just sat there and then like, whatever going off in my head. And I was like, oh yeah, like I meant to turn that on like straight away. And like my cat, Bruce, she was like getting cold as well and like snuggling up and sitting in that sort of like pose she does when she's cold. And and just like it took me that long to put the heating on.
So it's just like sitting until you get cold enough to where you have no other choice.
Yeah, yeah. And I got to that point. I was really cold, and like all I have to do is put the heating on, and I haven't done it. So yeah, that's the most recent one. There's been several today, I think, but that's the most recent one.
Yeah. Well, I hope that you're warmer now. Wait, did you end up turning the heating on?
I did turn the heating on.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, so I'm warmer now.
And most importantly, your cat's okay, right? Your cat's
she's fine.
she's warm.
Yeah, she's absolutely fine. Now she's just wandering around now after having a snack, and I'm sure she'll be yelling at us at some point.
Oh, good. So when were you diagnosed with ADHD?
So I was 39. I'm 40 now, so this was coming up on a year.
Okay, yeah, so pretty recent.
Yeah. So I read an article in The Guardian at the beginning of 2020 by a writer who had got diagnosed when he was 40. And so before that, like I was aware of ADHD, but I guess I just thought it didn't apply to me. I think partly, well, completely because of like a lot of the stereotypes, and I was like, well, I'm not hyperactive and all this stuff. And then I was reading it, and I was like, yeah, I struggle with this, I struggle with that. But then the bit where he said, I can never remember where I put my keys. And I was like, oh, I didn't know like memory problems were part of it. And then that was like, oh, okay. So, and that's something like, keys are an obvious example, but like anything, like I used to call it going on automatic. Like when I'd be like, oh, I don't know where I put my keys, I don't know where I did this. I was like, I wasn't like, my body did it, but my mind wasn't there.
Right.
And I didn't realize that was part of it. And then once I did, then I started reading up more on it and talking to friends who had it. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I do. And so I went to my doctor, my GP, and I beforehand, but like I guess it's that kind of thing I think a lot of us probably have, that like before you go, you're sort of worried that you won't be taken seriously or that no, you don't have it. You're just like, you just suck basically,
Yeah.
So like I sort of over prepared a bit, and so I came to her with like the forms that they get you to fill out when you're there, and I got my girlfriend to fill out the partner one, and I took the stuff, and she went through it, and she made me fill out another questionnaire, and then she was like, yeah, you probably do, but here on the NHS the GP can't diagnose you. You have to be referred to a specialist.
Okay.
And mental health services here are really underfunded. And she was like, so I've referred you, but like the waiting list is probably going to be over a year before you see them. Yeah. And this was before the pandemic, so obviously it was going to, and then so I was like, oh, okay, I'll try and I'll wait. But then once the pandemic started and like lockdown happened and everything, I just found like the removal of like all structure like completely stopped me sort of pretty much functioning. Especially work.
I don't think you're alone in that, and I think
totally.
People are probably going to hear this and be like, "You too? Okay, thank goodness." It's just it's you put it perfectly. It's like the structure that you had that you'd like created to work for you is all of a sudden like taken down, and you just are left with like, what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it's probably quite common for a lot of undiagnosed people that you've put all these structures in place that you don't realize exactly why you've done it and what you're doing to like function with the symptoms that you have.
Sure.
And so when that happened, I was like, I'm just not producing any work, and obviously as a freelancer I've got to produce things to make money to live.
Right.
So I was like, well, I guess I should probably just suck it up and see a private specialist and get diagnosis that way. Yeah. So a friend of mine, she'd been to a place and she recommended. I say been, Zoom. It's all over Zoom at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Been quote unquote.
Yeah. So I went. I had the appointment there, and we went through all the stuff, and he was like, yeah, you absolutely do. And and so since then, currently failing, but trying to find the right medication for me and trying to do a bunch of things. And so it's been about a year.
Yeah, since like the official diagnosis.
Since the official diagnosis, and then it's been interesting trying to figure out how to live and work, I suppose, in ways that work for me.
What has been something that's helped you? What are some like tools and tricks you've used?
I mean, I think the number one thing that's helped me is realizing that it's not my fault, and that allows me to go a lot easier on myself than I would have been. So that like completely life changing. Obviously, it takes a while to stop having the sort of negative self talk that you do, but and then tools wise, I suppose. I mean, I'm sort of struggling at the moment. I'm having a bit of a bad period, so like a lot of the things I've been using that have been helping, I've been falling out of using. But like I found like a bullet journal really useful, and it's something like I'd never considered because when you search on the internet for bullet journals, you get all these like really pretty like art projects, like Pinterest is full of like, and obviously that's like I look at that and I'm like, that's an enormous amount of work. That's not.
It's like I already have a to-do list full of things to do. I can't add that.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I can't remember what it was I read, but then I realized that that's actually not what the like original. If you go back to the original, obviously the writer Carroll, he has ADHD and like he created it as a method of dealing with it. And when I looked at it and when I looked at how the system works, and it's like, really doesn't have to be pretty. It can be, then that made an enormous difference when I'm using it. Not just keeping track of stuff, but also being able to look back at things. Because I know like a lot of us sort of struggle with, I suppose, like seeing the shape of our days and the shape of our months and weeks and lives.
Yeah.
And when you're jumping from project to project, like I do in comics, it's really, really helpful. And it allows me to see like how long things take, things like that. Like I could never, ever tell you how long a page would take or anything like that, or how long a cover would take me to draw. And I would always like underestimate how long it's going to take.
Well, that's a great segue into to start talking about some of the expectations of your profession in particular. What can you just kind of, I was going to say, can you illustrate that for us? But like, with words, knowing that, I wish you could just draw something and show us.
Oh,
but can you just tell us a little bit about what that's like?
Yeah. So it's a really sort of, it's an interesting industry. And when I'm talking about the comics industry, I mean specifically the American comics industry, because it's different. Like the French one's very different, Japanese one's very different. In American comics, generally speaking, comics come out monthly as an issue, and then after a certain amount of issues, they're collected in a trade paperback or graphic novel, whatever you want to call them. And so every month an issue comes out, which generally has between 20 and 24 pages of art in it, which means that the artist is expected to draw 20 to 24 pages of art a month. And generally speaking, like it takes, and this varies wildly as well, but the assumption is it takes an artist a day to draw a page, which basically means your entire month of working days is filled with that comic. And that's, that you can draw a comic every month for years. So essentially it's your entire working life is taken up by drawing this comic with no real gaps built into it unless you work to build the gaps in, which is something you can do much easier when you do the creator-owned stuff, when you control everything, compared to the superhero stuff where you don't have any control on any of that.
Sure.
So it's like a very demanding job. And you're talking like 10, 12 hour, 14-hour days sometimes on some of the pages.
I told you I started The Wicked and the Divine, and I was looking through, and I just kept finding myself staring at the page and being like, how does a person do that? Like what, just like the amount of detail that goes into it. I all the people who are really into comics are gonna like laugh at me because I know very little about it, but I just felt like the eyes really stuck out to me, and I felt like I was being looked at, by these images, and there's just so much detail. You could sit there and stare at it forever. So I imagine the amount of work is just insane.
Yeah, it is. That's good actually, because like the eyes are the thing I always start with on a character. That's the sort of thing I always. So it's nice that it's working.
Yeah,
it's supposed to.
It's certainly, especially for people who aren't, who are trying to get into comic books, who are, I mean, I can't speak to, obviously my boyfriend is obsessed with it, so I imagine he thinks that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I always, some comics artists get really, really, really detailed and really sort of, sometimes I feel like over detailed, but I sort of, my sort of standing point for any page is like clarity, and I really want to make sure that the story is clear and you understand what's happening, unless you're not supposed to understand what's happening, and then that's a different thing. But like,
sure,
I always consider that it might be somebody's first comic, like you say, and you don't, and there's a lot of sort of like, I guess, I don't know, like, I don't know how to refer it, but like there's a lot of comics that sort of assume that you've been reading comics for years and do all these things that, like, if you're not used to it, you look at the page, you've got no idea what's going on.
Sure.
And so, like, I'm always trying to make sure it's clear to the reader what's happening. A lot of the time, that does require a lot of work and a lot of detail. And so, even for somebody who doesn't have issues with, motivation or attention or whatever, like, it's a demanding job. And it's really hard on the body as well. You're sort of leaning over a drawing table.
That's what I was just going to ask. Yeah.
That's another thing. So I'm hypermobile as well, which I recently discovered. Too. Oh yeah.
Yep, me too. Yeah. I never knew that they were comorbidities.
Yeah.
I was always just say, yes, I am hypermobile, and also I am ADHD. And
so I only recently discovered they're connected too.
Well, and just for people who are listening, hypermobility, I like to describe it as being very stretchy without the muscles to back it up. That's my layperson example of how that works, at least.
Yeah, exactly. So and it's like people say, oh, hypermobile, that sounds really good. I'm like, no, it's the opposite of good. It's not. It's not fun. Yeah, so I sort of explain it as, my joints don't work how they should, so the muscles are trying to do the work of the joints, but they're not built for it. And ironically, obviously, that ends up a lot of the time for me being very stiff and having a lot of muscle knots and being a lot of pain from being at the drawing table all the time. It's a really physically demanding job in that respect. Especially if there's not really any, like, for people who type and your average person, there's a lot of like ergonomic stuff and a lot of ergonomic studies around it. And like, this is how you should sit. There's stuff you can buy. There's not really anything like that for drawing, because the body posture is different. You're not like leaning back and typing. So any sort of chair that's designed for like typing doesn't necessarily give the same support for when you're drawing. And things like that. And
that needs to change.
Yeah, but like we're such a small subset of like people who use office furniture. I guess it's just not the. Yeah, but so it's a exhausting job at times, a physically demanding job for people who don't have issues like ADHD and hypermobility. So sort of adding those in as well. And I only discovered I was hypermobile, I think probably about four or 5 years ago, because I guess again it's a sort of I think I misunderstood because of like public perception and stereotypes. I was like, well, I can't be hypermobile because I'm like always really stiff and in pain, and like I can't. That's because obviously my muscles are all locked up because they were trying to hold my joints in place.
Right. It's so funny how our brains just like write things off. Like, nope, that can't be.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard about that. Like.
yeah, totally. And like I went to a physio at one point, and he was, they do the things like, oh, let's see, like try and bend over and touch your toes. I was like, oh, okay, I'm really stiff. But like I bent over and touched my toes. It's like, oh, okay. So, but like he didn't say it. He was like, oh, it's quite unusual that you can do that, no problem. I was like, oh, didn't like cool. Get any further with that. So it's an intense job, and it's when I didn't know that I had ADHD, I suppose I also didn't quite understand how exhausting it was and how much it was, a lot of it was draining me, and how much, it's a weird thing to say, I think, for people who don't have it to understand necessarily, but because a lot of times, you know, they see you as like, oh, you're not doing the work and whatever, and you're taking a long time to start, but like, it's so much effort to get to start that like you're putting even more effort in than your average person, constantly, just to get up to a point where you're not producing as much as they are, right. Or in the times that you're supposed to anyway. And I didn't quite realize just how exhausting it was. So The Wicked and Divine was a 5-year project. I think it was 5 years. It's supposed to be 5 years. It might have lasted a bit longer, but so when we started it, basically, so Kieran Gillen's the writer that I've worked with a lot. Before The Wicked and Divine, we've been working on this book, Young Avengers, for Marvel. And that was it was a big hit. We were really successful with it. But we were just kind of like hitting up against the limitations of what you can do in, first of all, a shared universe. Secondly, a universe that's not a comic that's not owned by you. You know, you have to. There are sort of limitations to what you can do, and things like, a Young Avengers book, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm very, I'm pleased with what we did. And like it's a predominantly queer team, and like it's a lot of things that we did with it that we're really happy that we did. But at the same time, like when you're operating within a shared universe, especially one that's been around for like 40 or 50 years, sure. there are like roles within that certain characters inhabit that you can't replace, I guess. So like an example Kieran uses, you can't create a character at DC who's like the ideal of like noble humility and working for the good of people and everything, because that's Superman, and you can't replace Superman, right?
So they can't overlap too much.
Yeah. So like and I guess Captain America sort of a similar one in Marvel. They do replace him, but then Steve Rogers always comes back. But that's another thing. Right. So we were sort of like, well, if we were to create like a, not really a superhero universe, but that kind of thing now, what would it look like? What would it be? And that's sort of where Wicked and Divine came from. And so then we started this book, and the other thing of it was as well, not many people in comics get to at the end of their career look back and like, here's a big chunk of work that I did that's mine. A lot of people,
wow, yeah,
a lot of people go all the way through it just working on superhero stuff, which the companies own, they don't own. And so you've got people like Brian and Fiona, who did Saga. Obviously a big inspiration. Then they had a massive hit with that. And the company that we publish with, Image, that Saga's published with as well, is entirely creator owned, and allow you to do that sort of thing. And so we said, we've been working together, because I've been working with Kieran since 2003, off and on. Yeah, so a long time. And like we got to that point, and we're like, we haven't got like a big work that's ours. Like we've done our own stuff, but like nothing like that. So this was like kind of at this point in our careers. He sent me an email when he first had the idea. I was like, for once in our life, let's not be stupid. and actually like take this moment we've got and do something with it and do our own thing.
Do you feel like it was partly because you had done stuff for Marvel and DC and some like bigger like shared universes that you were able to
totally. Totally. Yeah. It's like, as much as there are a lot of stuff in comics that isn't superheroes still get, within the industry anyway, superheroes still get the most attention, and it's definitely a good way. It's definitely a good way to get a name for yourself. It's possible to get a name for yourself outside of that, but it's easier with superheroes.
Didn't you design the Captain Marvel costume?
I did.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Big Captain Marvel fans over here.
Yeah. Oh man, it's been amazing. It's so strange, but brilliant. Yeah, no, so I've designed a bunch of stuff for Marvel, like her and Ms. Marvel, who's got a series coming out next year, I think. Loki, X-Men, bunch of stuff, but like Captain Marvel's definitely the biggest one. Yeah, no, it's really, it's been a brilliant few years. Like, so because I designed that in 2012, I think.
Okay.
And then, obviously then, the movie came out. There's been a second movie started. It's a really strange part of comics in that, like, I did that like in my little home studio in Hackney where I was living at the time, and just about keeping things together, just about paying rent and everything. And then like you look at what's come from that little drawing in that little room to now is really like, it's brilliant. It's really, really brilliant, but really strange at the same time.
I wonder what it's like for people to be sitting in that kind of situation and working on this thing and not being able to look back and say like, oh, I'm really glad I did that because it paid off. It's, looking forward and just hoping beyond hope that some opportunity comes of it.
Yeah. It's totally like it's a really sort of, when I look at it, it's kind of like a crazily risky career in that respect. You never know how these things are going to pan out. Like, but especially these days, like a lot of like superhero books get cancelled within like 5 or 6 issues. Like it's hard to have a when you do have a hit, it's great, but like it's hard to stick. So it's like it's almost impossible to like plan a career, I suppose. Like a lot of it is just luck. It was hard work and everything as well, and but yeah, I
love what you just said. Is it's almost impossible to plan a career. I mean, acting is the same way.
Yeah,
it's like, I was just talking about this the other day. Like, I can set the goal of booking 3 voiceover gigs next month, but like, I don't have control. I can't, I can audition for 100 of them and still not book it because I'm not the right person. But it's just like, no, it'll just kind of unfold the way it unfolds, and I'll control the things I can and let go of the things I can't.
Yeah. Do you find that like as a source of anxiety, or do you just kind of?
I think I used to more. I mean, yes, it is definitely a cause of anxiety because, we fear the unknown. It's like, I mean, there's so much potential. I could do this, and oh my gosh, I could do that. But like, what if I don't? And like, what if I do and I'm in that situation and I can't handle it? And it's just kind of scary, right?
Yeah, it's weird for me. Like, I think the way my ADHD works, because I have trouble conceiving of the future in general, like in anything beyond sort of abstract terms, I've never really thought about it too much. So like more immediate things like, oh, how am I going to pay rent? Like that kind of stuff, I need to get a job in the next sort of like week or so so I can cover rent and things, which was, a long period of my career was definitely stressful. But like, if someone say, where do you see yourself in 5 years or whatever, I'd be like, I have no idea. And what I can't know in terms of my career, but also like, it's just something that I never consider. So in that sort of respect, I think, and this sort of interacts a bit with my girlfriend's anxiety in a sort of bad way, in the sense that like, she sort of does need to know those things in a more concrete way than I do. And like, for me, I find it really hard to think of those things. So, especially pre-diagnosis, that was a bit of a struggle. Than now, like we both understand where it's all coming from, so it's a lot easier.
So much easier to communicate when you have like language to it. Like you have like this kind of self-awareness and language to labels to describe something.
Yeah. That's one of the things. Like it's like improved our relationship so much that now I understand myself in ways I didn't used to. And you're right. And like can communicate and can explain things and in ways that I just couldn't before.
I have a question that I'm just so excited to ask you in particular. I have a few that I have, but this one, okay. Do you think that ADHD can be a superpower? I was like, he draws superheroes all the time. I have to know what you think of that question and what you think.
Yeah, like it's a thing I've seen about a bit, and I find it, I suppose the way I look at it is there's definitely things about ADHD that are beneficial, especially to a creative career. But I think for me, it feels like calling it a superpower sort of is papering over the issues that it causes as well. So it makes it like obviously it's a weird thing, like technically in the UK it's classed as a disability as a whole, but like I don't necessarily see it that way. Like it's just a different way of being, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't know, so like it definitely, there are definitely sides to it that are beneficial, right. And like I'm not sure, it's impossible to know, but I'm not sure I would have the career I had if I didn't have it.
What kinds of ways can it be beneficial for creative people, or you in particular? But yeah, just creative people.
So for me, I think the way like our minds jump around so much lets me see connections and possibilities that other people might not. So like, for example, so it's like the Captain Marvel costume. So the story of this is Kelly Sue DeConnick was the writer on the new series at the time, and she wasn't happy with the costume designs that were coming in-house. And she asked the editor, Steve Wacker, if I could design it. And he said, well, officially no, but like if you were talking and he happened to like show you some drawing that you liked and then I happened to see it, then maybe something could happen. I don't know. And so she said this to me and I was like, well, obviously I'm going to do this for Kelly Sue. She's one of my absolute favorite people in the world. And yeah, so she showed me the stuff that I got already. And I'd never really thought about designing for the character or anything before. So I looked at the character's history. I looked at the character's, her personality and everything. And I had the costume in my head within about half an hour. Like, and then the final costume is very similar to like my first draft. Like all of the connections of all of the bits, like instantly sort of like knit together in what I wanted it to look like. And like the way sort of the aspects of her like Air Force history and like the Captain Marvel legacy, because like she's not the first character with a name, like all of those elements, I could immediately see how they all slot together.
So you see the possibilities and connections. I like that.
Yeah. So like that sort of thing is definitely super beneficial. Yeah. So that like, yeah, just that, and just in terms of like storytelling connections as well. Comics art is a weird thing because I mean I'm a writer as well as an artist, and I'm doing more of my own writing now. I've been working with Kieran so much, I've not had much time, but like comics art itself is also kind of writing. Like a lot of it is like telling the story and like making the sort of connections within things to enhance the story or to make people think or feel different ways about things. Like I feel like I can make those connections pretty easily, and I feel like that is sort of connected to ADHD.
The superpower question is like a weird thing, I think, and when people have asked me about it before, I've brought up, and now I am not an expert, so I'm probably going to butcher this and everybody's going to hate me, but I think of the X-Men and specifically like Rogue, who is, can't physically touch another person and is like struggling with this disability that like it seems like no one else has, and then when she goes and gets these tools and like training and self-awareness and all that, it becomes a superpower that she can use in the right situation.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah. And I definitely and I also think like I understand the impulse as well to say it's super bad, because a lot of the perception is, this is just an entirely negative thing, and it's not entirely negative. And like, yeah, like you say, with the right tools, with the right management, like there's a lot of beneficial things that come out of it too.
Right. But it's you're right. It's such a balance, because you can't just be like, it's a superpower, and because then people are going to be like, well, congratulations, you have ADHD, and like, go get the tools and then do the thing, and you're like, okay, wait, it doesn't work like that. So there's actually a lot of bad stuff that comes with it, and it's like it really having that balance.
Yeah, I wish it worked like that. And there's things like, so I suppose when my hyper focus is pointed in the right direction, which isn't always the way, it can be really useful. Because obviously, comics art requires a lot of focus, requires a lot of time. And then they're like, it'll often be like, so I've got this thing on my computer, and there's lots of different versions of it. The one that like locks it every 30 minutes to make you stand up and do stuff.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Which I got because of the hypermobility stuff. I wanted to try and move about more. But I have a habit of like, when I'm like super focused and the thing pops up, say you've got 20 seconds before it's going to lock, I'm like, well, I can't stop now, I'm in the middle of something, so I turn it off. And in my head, every single time I'm like, oh, and I'll stand up in like 10 minutes, it'll be fine. And then it's like 4 hours later and I haven't stood up. And I've got a lot of work done in that time, but also I'm like, I'm really hungry, my back hurts, haven't been to the toilet, I should probably like move. But I mean, in those moments I do get the work done. And this is going way back to like the deadline, like the way the comics industry is set up. And Wicked and Divine was such a big project, which by the end of it I was totally burnt out and exhausted, and I had to take some time off, which then led into like, I was like, oh, after a couple of months I'll be fine. And I'm like, oh, I'm not fine. And then like that's sort of like when I started to figure out things where something was up. Sure. But every month I'd be like, so you've got this month to draw the comic. The first sort of week or so I wouldn't really do anything, and then in the second week I'd start to do stuff. By the second, then the third and fourth week I'd be really working like 14 hours to get stuff done. And at the time I thought, well, that's because the previous issue I had to do that and I was exhausted, so I need time to recover. And that's partly true, but also, obviously getting started is a big problem for us, and the stress of the deadline is one of the things that got me working. It's like, oh, I've only got like 2 weeks to finish this, and I should have started 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And it's not a great way to live, I don't think. So like, I'm glad now that I understand that's what's happening, so I can try to do things around it, even though I'm not doing a very good job at the moment. But like, so it's like constantly every month it was like really stressed for a week or two. And sort of before I was diagnosed as well, I think it's probably fairly common, but because I was kind of, I suppose, quite ashamed of that, because it felt like I wasn't doing what I should be doing and I wasn't doing what other people could do. And I felt like I was constantly letting down the rest of my team, because, when you're working on a book like Wicked and Divine, there was 6 of us. If I don't get the work done, then Matt, the colorist, can't do his work. And if I get it to him late, then he has to like work harder and faster. And then the letterer, Clayton, he has to work with less time to get it done. And Chrissy, our editor, she has to like put stuff together sort of last minute. So there's that constant, not just stress of like not getting it done, but also like constant feeling of letting people down.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's kind of trying to, I suppose, like justify it to people, because it's like a lot of I'm not sure how to put it, I guess not excuses, but definitely like trying to cover up, because I felt like I was failing them all the time. But because I didn't know why, obviously I was blaming myself for it. So it was a lot of like, and then I can't remember where this started, sorry, but there's definitely like,
so you're talking about like your process and the expectations. So
it's sort of, so it's kind of amazing to look back at the career I've had, considering like that's basically constant for 10 or 15 years now, of like just about getting stuff done in time, often not getting stuff done quite in time. and like not really understanding why. But despite that, like things have turned out pretty well. I've had a pretty good career. So that's another weird one as well. Is kind of it feels a bit, I don't know. It feels weird to say how much I've struggled to somebody on the outside when you look at it on the outside, like I've had a really successful career and I've done really well. And it feels, I don't know how to put it, but like almost like, oh wow, my diamond shoes are too tight or something, you know, like I'm not by any sort of measure I've had success, but like it's been really, really difficult.
Yeah. The cost at which
and I
it comes is just so high.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things like, because I really struggled to start work in the mornings, I end up working really late when I'm working.
Oh yeah, you mentioned
and
that.
so that, yeah. So things like, you know, I'll often go to bed at like 4 or 5 if I'm working on deadline. And what that means a lot of the time is like, then there's things like, well, that means you don't go out and see your friends at night when they want you to. And so when I look back at sort of the Wicked and Divine period in particular, like a lot of the friendships I let slide because of the way I was getting the work done, like all those sort of costs that people don't really see from the outside, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I think it just makes it even more important and more meaningful for you to share that, you know, to know that it's not, you know, that like you've had so much success, and like what goes on with you like personally is also, you know, I feel like we kind of deify people we consider successful, you know, where it's like, well, they don't have any problems because, you know, they did this and this and that, and the answer is that's not true. And you know, even if you cross that a certain threshold of your career, that's always going to be there. It's just a matter of if you have systems in place and you have people around you, and can navigate your way through at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like, so I talk about having ADHD quite publicly, quite a lot, for sort of, I feel because I'm in a position where like talking about it is never going to like get me in trouble with the boss or get me fired or anything like that. I can take advantage of that for people who aren't in that position.
Right.
But also, like, if I hadn't read that article when that guy had mentioned this particular symptom, the memory loss, the memory problem symptom, I never would have figured it out. And so I want to, like, if there are people like following me on social media or whatever who read something that I say and then realize, oh, that's it for them too. That's like, it's such an amazing thing to like understand yourself in that way.
Yeah.
And like I know I've had several people say to me that they've been diagnosed because of me talking about it and then realizing, oh, this is a symptom, this isn't just something else. And like I suppose it makes sense because I think ADHD people do tend to be creative. A lot of people I know either, you know, already knew they had it or have been diagnosed since who are creative people, not just like comics, but like there's a comedian friend of mine who's been diagnosed, and writers and musicians, and like it's strange because also I suppose I feel, you know, going back to it being a superpower, like I don't think any of us would have been these people without it. And so as much as it does provide a lot of difficulties and struggles, also we probably definitely wouldn't have made the work that we've made without it, I don't think.
Yeah, it's good to recognize. So we talked about when you're drawing, and we talked about like the posture and all that, but what does it feel like to make art?
See, I'm not one of those people that necessarily loves drawing.
Okay, yeah.
I'm happy when it's done, and I love it when it's done, but like the actual process is always a bit of a battle for me. Partly the getting started, like, and this is one thing, going back to like tools that have been useful, is the understanding now that I do struggle with like starting because I'm seeing the whole thing and not like each step.
Right, breaking it down.
And and comics art requires a lot of steps. So like understanding now, like, well, first I have to do the layouts from the script, and then I have to decide what reference I need to find, and then I take this reference, and then I do this and this and this. And like breaking the steps down has made it a lot easier to start. But before that, it was a real struggle to even sort of like conceive of the page, like how to start it and how to get it done. So that was constantly a battle. Now it's easier, but even so, like, yeah, it's tough. But like when something, I mean, maybe like 1 in like 100 things turns out how I see it in my head to start with. So that's like, and when it happens, it's absolutely fantastic, but like it's so rare. So, but like if I'm happy with the page at the end of it, it's great. It's really good. And when I see it coming together, a lot of the time, because my process is kind of sort of, I suppose, scattered, but like, so I don't know how much you know about like how comics like pages are traditionally made, but assuming people listening don't know,
yeah.
Okay. So the traditional method is first of all you you get the script, you do the layout. So basically you break down what's in the script. Some writers like break it down per panel, some don't, some leave it up to the artist, but you know how many panels are supposed to be on the page. You break it down the layouts and how it's going to look, and then you pencil it, and the pencils are usually quite defined, and that's sort of because in the sort of conveyor belt method of making superhero comics, there's often a separate inker so they can keep working, get it done faster.
Right. I only know this because Joe has told me certain things, and I was like, "What does inking?
Right.
What does inking mean?" I don't know what that.
But now it's an
understand.
entire career. Yeah. But a lot of the time these days, people ink themselves, and I ink myself, which means my pencils can be rougher because I'm doing it. I know what's supposed to be there, but so that means I do a lot of the work in ink that other people might have done in the pencils. And so like a lot of the time I'll be like, oh yeah, and this is going to be some trees or whatever. There's like a little squiggle, and so the page doesn't come together until like the last minute a lot of the time. So up until that point, it feels kind of I just keep chipping away at it, but I'm not sure. And then like in the last minute, it's like, oh yeah, no, it's working. Especially if I'm coloring myself, because I'm not a very seasoned colorist, and I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just like throwing stuff at it until it works, and then suddenly it works, and it's amazing that it's worked. I'm really happy. But like, so the longest period on the page, the longest amount of time working on anything is kind of, oh, I'm not sure. I'll keep going. We'll see what happens. Yeah. So I'm not like, I don't necessarily love the process. And also there's a like, I had a conversation with a friend quite recently about how our styles are sort of sourced in, like, I guess what can be considered our disabilities. Like he has vision issues that means that the way he focuses on the drawing is a lot more about like the light and shade and and things like that. And for me, there's two parts to it. One, with the hypermobility. So I done like a lot of art instructions, like, oh, you draw with your elbow and blah 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 and all this stuff, and like I don't have the stability in my arm to be able to do that. I can't draw like a smooth or a good line from the elbow, so I have to work sort of from the wrist. And so I work digitally. I draw on a screen, which means I can undo my lines, which is very helpful because a lot of the time I won't get the line that I'm trying to get. So like I'll Control Z. So I'm probably drawing like 4 or 5 lines for every line I actually see on the page to get it right, which also adds to the time and everything. That's extra time consuming. But because of that, then it means that like, so I have quite like a clean style, like a clear style. I don't do a lot of cross hatching and things like that. And that started because I haven't got the stability in my hand to do it. I can't draw that kind of thing, especially when I was drawing on paper. So because I couldn't do that, then I was like, well, not even necessarily consciously, but then this is how my style evolved from that. And then the sort of, in terms of the ADHD, like you get a lot of people saying, you know, if you're using photo reference, which, you know, most artists do, or like you study anatomy enough and then you won't need it. And I'm like, well, I can't hold that stuff in my head. Like I can't, because of the working memory issues, like I can't keep that stuff in my head. And I know what a human body looks like and whatever, but like if I need to know exactly where like a muscle joins to a bone or something, I probably won't get it 100% right. So I need that stuff in front of me all the time.
Right.
So it's just it's interesting how my style is definitely sourced in those things that are happening for me.
Yeah. You mentioned that once you finish a piece, like once it's done or once it starts to come together, that it seems like it's a good feeling. I'm just curious, like what, this is going to be a weird question, but thank you for your patience in advance. But
Yeah.
what is your relationship to the pieces that you've made in the past that are done?
It's a strange one. It used to be that I couldn't stand looking at them. It's weird. So like one of the things I think that's helped me in my career is that I can quite quickly after I've done something, look at it and know what's wrong with it. And I don't necessarily know how to fix it yet. I might not have learned the skills to fix it, but I can see what's wrong. But what that meant was, and what still means, I guess, so like after like a month or two, I don't want to look at something because I can see the stuff that I'm wrong with it, unless it's very rare. And I'm like, oh no, I'm still happy with that. And then so there's a period where I'm like, oh no, that's no good. I can do better next time, etc., etc. But then after, I don't know, a few years, I can look at something and go, well, this is the best I could do at the time. I can see all the stuff that's good with it. I can see all the stuff that works. So it kind of like, it dips down and then back up again.
So you don't have any, like, do you have any of your artwork like up in your house or anything like that you look at? Okay. I was so curious about that. Like, can you look at it on a regular basis, or is it just like, no, that's work?
I mean, I totally could if it's something I really like. Yeah. But I've never been the sort to sort of have my artwork around. My parents have got it all over there.
Oh, of course.
Really nice. Yeah. Bless them. But I don't know. It's such a weird, and it's a weird industry as well, in the sense that like you're producing work that's like going to be around for years a lot of the time, but you're not producing it to be like a single object that should be like that's going to be looked at constantly.
Right.
Like it's sort of, and so I don't know. It's. I try not to think about it too much because it's kind of depressing. But a lot of people like will read a single issue of a comic in about 5 minutes and like barely like take the art in. This thing that you spent all month on.
Right.
So it's still like weirdly disposable in that sense. So I'm not sure if I'm necessarily like putting in. I don't have like the mindset of like this is a thing that like someone's gonna have to looking at constantly, even though like I put way too much work into it and definitely too much of a perfectionist over it. It's such a strangely disposable art, unless I'm doing something like as a poster or something specific like that.
That's so interesting because like, my experience with reading it is, I mean, as kids, we look at a picture book and we like look at the pictures, and then like, as we become adults, most of us, read novels, and it's just like reading, what do I need to read for the story? And what I think is interesting about looking through your books is that the visuals will tell the story without me even realizing that that's how I'm getting the story. So in that way, it's like, oh, I may skim by it, but I actually took it in more than I thought I did.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's like specifically what I try to do. Like, I feel like if you take all of the dialogue out of a comic that I've drawn and you can still pretty much tell what's happening, then I've succeeded.
Yeah.
Like, because it is a storytelling medium, you're trying to tell a story, and that's always my focus with it. And so I guess like, so even like on a level that you're not necessarily aware it's happening, it is sort of happening, which is good. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of all that, I mean, I'm just curious if there's any projects that you're working on now that we can support.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a weird period. So literally just now this week, end of April, mine and Kieran's story in Batman Black and White's just come out, which is a sort of short story that broke both of us completely to make. It's utterly ridiculous. It's huge amount of work for such a short story. That came out this week. I'm working on another thing. oh man, I'm not sure I can talk about it. I'm working on another thing right now I can't talk about because it hasn't been announced.
Okay.
After that, I'm writing and drawing a Captain Marvel story in issue 30, which I think comes out. I think that comes out in June, so that'll be shortly when this goes out. Yeah, which I'm really excited about because like obviously I designed both of them, but I never got to actually work on the actual comics of either of them.
Okay.
So having this chance to write and draw a story is really cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And then, no, I've signed NDAs on the other things. So I literally can't talk about them.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, but it's good. It's like it's a couple of things. Like one of them, like is really I'm very excited about. It's like one of the biggest things I've done, and yeah, we'll see how it turns out. But I'm really, really excited to be involved.
So I guess the moral of the story here is stay tuned.
yeah, seriously. Yeah.
Follow Jamie on Instagram or anywhere so that you get this fun news.
The first second I can. Yeah. And then after that, I'm back on the series that I've been working on for a long while called The Killing Horizon, which is my own solo sort of science fiction comic, which hopefully should be coming out later in the year. It was supposed to start coming out last year, but everything happened last year. So
what happened? I don't know. What did I miss? Oh no.
Nothing much. No.
Yeah, so Jamie, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. I feel like I've learned so much about comics and your process, and I just am so glad that you could come on.
Oh, thank you. It's been really fun. I'm really glad I could. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. So
thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Keep us updated and we will make sure to stay tuned as you have many projects coming up. So is the best place to find you on Instagram? Is that where you're most active on social media?
Yeah, Instagram and Twitter. So Instagram, they're both just at McKelvie.
Okay, great.
McKelvie. And so like I'm on both, but like during periods when I'm really busy, I'll often deactivate Twitter.
Got it.
Whereas Instagram sort of just stays there constantly.
Cool. Good to know.
Warning, there's a lot of photos of my cat.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's terrible. I don't like if people are like trying to like find me for art and there's just a lot of photos of my cat. There's art there as well, but
yeah, cats are works of art.
Absolutely, especially this one. She's looking at me right now because she thinks she should have dinner, even though it's still an hour to go.
Oh,
but yeah, Instagram's probably the most prolific. Yeah.
Perfect. So. Well, and I'll link that in the episode notes. So awesome. Well, thank you, and we'll stay in touch. Take care.
Thank you.
And that's it for today for the ADHD Artist Podcast. This podcast was produced by me, Sarah Guise. Original music composed by Christopher Aaron Narr. You can find more of his work at www.christopheraaronnar.com. Narr is spelled Knarr. Podcast artwork by Joseph Ramsky. For any inquiries, you can contact him directly at jramski3@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the ADHD Artist Pod.